Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Greenbank United this morning. Just a few announcements to get the day started. Thank you, Teresa, for your prelude. Just a reminder that these services are live streamed, so the camera tends to pick up anything in the first two pews and up, so you're all safe. For pastoral care emergencies, please contact Val Hunter, and we've lined up several personnel to assist as required. Few upcoming meetings. Greenbank's AGM is Sunday, February 18th after church, and it'll start around noonish because we've got to wait for Ann Meredith, Reverend Ann Meredith, our supervisory minister, to get here. She's got a church service at her own church that morning. Seagrave's AGM is Wednesday, February 21 at 7 p.m. There is an M&P meeting this Tuesday, February 6th, so as usual, any praise or concerns, please submit in writing to any member of M&P. There's a Greenbank Trustees meeting on Monday, February 12th at 1 o'clock here. And the Unified Board meeting, their annual meeting, is Wednesday, March 6th at 7 p.m. here at Greenbank. Annual reports were due on Friday to Val, so on behalf of Val, she thanks everybody. I'm still delinquent, but she's aware of that. Exercise for seniors on Wednesdays is still ongoing at Seagrave on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. It lasts about 45 minutes. Betty Lou Beacock is the contact for that. Let's Talk About It happens at Seagrave on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock. John Olivero is a contact for that. Pulpit Supply, we're now fully booked until the end of April, with just a few openings left in May and June. Thank you, Darlene, for all that work. So February 11th at Seagrave, we have Paul Kneebone. February 14th, which is an Ash Wednesday service at Seagrave at 7 o'clock, and that's put on by the joint session. February 19th at Greenbank, Sunday, February 19th, we'll have Reverend Jan Stobie here. It's the first Sunday of Lent, and we'll have communion. And February 25 at Seagrave is our own Darlene Hallett. With the annual meetings coming up, there are some vacancies, so I would ask anyone that has any interest in filling a spot to speak to anybody on the various committees, myself, Debbie, anybody. So in Greenbank, we have a few vacancies coming up. There's a vacancy for ministry and personnel. There's one vacancy for stewards. There's one vacancy for session. There's one vacancy for trustees. Of course, we're changing to our new governance with the AGM. So we will be electing a church board chairperson and a church board secretary. So if any of these interest you in the least, please let us know. On Seagrave, we have one vacancy for session, and then again, they need a local board chair and a local board secretary. So the rotation, all the groups have begun rotating, and which is healthy and good, and that's why there's so many openings, particularly in Seagrave. The last one I have is World Day of Prayer, which is Friday, March 1st at 1 o'clock here at Greenbank, hosted by Seagrave, and RSV by February 28th to either Eleanor or Betty Lou. And that's all I have. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Emmy.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. Just going to go over the land acknowledgements. Greenbank United Church is on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. May we respectfully honor the knowledge and understanding of the indigenous stewards of these ancestral lands and ensure that the voices of the First People are represented in all we do. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Before we get started, we have Mikey here to light our Christ candle and our rainbow candle. And I just wanted to share, this is something from a service prepared by Reverend Paul Douglas Walfall of First United Church from Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. So it states, God is love, and where God is, there is love. There is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. Let us celebrate the wonderful love that God has for all God's creation. All right. And our call to worship this morning also comes from Reverend Paul Douglas Walfall. And this is a responsive call to worship. Right? So it begins, with what shall we come before our God? Shall we come with gifts and offerings? God wants us to do justice. What does the Lord require of us? God wants us to come kindness. What does the Lord require of us? God wants us to walk humbly with God. Come then, let us worship God. Now to introduce our special guest today, I'll invite Emmy up here. Thanks.
Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest here today. First is Uju Umei. Uju is an accomplished writer, actor, and playwright who challenged herself to explore the life and times of Samuel Stout, Port Perry's first Black resident. Her deep dive drew her to local historians and members of the Ontario Black History Society who helped build the framework to understand how isolating this time would have been for Samuel in the mid-1800s. Following Uju's collaboration with the Theatre on the Ridge, Uju has breathed life into these stories. We are delighted to welcome both Uju and members of the Theatre on the Ridge to present a complimentary performance offering a glimpse into this captivating character. She's also a recipient of several prestigious awards. And Carrie Nicholson. Welcome. Carrie is currently the artistic director and co-founder of the Theatre on the Ridge, Durham Region's not-for-profit professional theater company. As a resident of the Scugog for over 2 decades, Carrie is also a founding member of the Lake Scugog Studio Tour and Metaphor Contemporary Craft Gallery. She is a past president of Scugog Council for the Arts and was the first executive director from 2009 to 2012. She's also a member of the Theatre Ontario Talent Bank and an independent theater adjudicator, arts educator, arts management consultant. Carrie has also received several prestigious awards for her work in the performing arts. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome.
Well, that was impressive. Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm the Artistic Director at Theatre on the Ridge, and it's a true joy and pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to be invited. It was a pleasure that someone reached out to us to share what we've been doing with Samuel Stout. So I want to thank the Affirming Committee and Debbie, who I think is the key instigator of how all this has come to play out. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Theatre on the Ridge other than to say we crossed our 10th year anniversary last year. And for those of you who don't know, we run a summer theatre festival each year, currently at the Scugog Shores Museum. And the season is up and running in terms of, yes, you can go find out what we're doing. And I hope we'll all see you there over the summer. And I do have a few flyers left I'll leave downstairs for afterwards if you're interested in that. Samuel Stout. I have been in Port Perry since 1997, and it wasn't till 2017 that I learned about Samuel Stout, that I even knew Samuel was in the community. Theatre on the Ridge was doing a project with the Lake Scugog Historical Society to develop live action vignettes on Pine Grove Cemetery to present some of the more memorable residents of the cemetery and sort of give a glimpse into their lives and perhaps even how they arrived in the cemetery. And it was through Paul Arculus's book that we came across this entry of Samuel Stout. And I had been completely unaware that there had been certainly not in the late 1800s, a black resident, a person of color in our community. So we needed to bring Samuel into the stories we were telling, but we weren't equipped to tell it from his perspective. So our playwright Graham Powell created a vignette that told the story from Samuel's white wife, who came as a visitation from the other side, from beyond, to sort of chastise people for forgetting about Samuel. And that was how we presented it in its first incarnation. But there was much more in the story we wanted to continue telling. And just didn't, we backburnered it a little bit. We'll get back to that. And then in 2020, in addition to COVID, which we all were impacted by, Black Tuesday also happened in early June. It was a momentous time that year. It triggered a lot of discussions. And we really sat down and faced the we can do better realization moment that came with this, and looking within our own sector and industry on how our intentions were lovely. I've learned over the last 5 years, intentions are not the same as impact, and they can be quite different. So we immediately rectified what we could in our own house, and realized that one of the things, it's not enough just to say, we intend to do this. We needed to say, we intend to do this, and we recognize that resources have to be put towards this. We have to make it happen. We can't just wait till money falls from the trees, as it were. So we began a much more active search. And we found an opportunity to support this project through the Ontario Culture Days Creatives in Residence program in 2021, where we were able to commission the play and commission the initial workshop process, which is a 5-day working it out, testing the ideas. And that's where we met Uju. So in 2022, we were able to commission the play from Uju. We had a little first go 1-day workshop to test out our ideas in February, and we presented the first full draft of this play at a public reading as part of Culture Days in September of 2022. And in 2023, through additional funding through FedDev Ontario, we were able to hold another week-long workshop in March 2023, because playwriting is not a one-stop process. We realized that after the very early readings and workshoppings we were doing, that the music Uju had talked about that was sort of a glue in her play needed to be embedded literally into the play. And in March 2023, we presented another public workshop that featured the music that Uju would like to see. And it helped us integrate that and the roles of the ancestors, which I'm sure Uju will mention later on. And that takes us to 2024, where we are now telling you about the play. And I think that's enough for me to get going with. I would like to just hand this over to Uju, who's going to tell you more about her journey. Not surprisingly, what we thought the play should be about was not at all what Uju felt the play should be about, which just speaks to the importance of the voice has to be the voice of the people that the story is telling the story, that we can't make those choices for Samuel. And Uju has done a lovely job. She'll talk about her process, and then while we may not be a massive group of Theatre on the Ridge members, we will do a few short excerpts to give you a little teaser of the play, and then we will, and we got music and everything. It's gonna be awesome. Okay, is it music time now before we go to Uju? Children's time, children. Do we have children? Children, come on down. Do come down to the front row. Do you like singing songs? All together? Like, this is a fun song, because I believe we're in a church, and I understand that songs get sung in churches a fair bit. Now, this is not restricted to just the children. Children of heart can certainly join in this. But I'm going to hand it over, because I am not a music director at this point. And this is the opening song from the play, and we thought it would be a lovely song to open our conversation. And it's a spiritual called Poor Rosie. How do we do this? Teresa, it's all over to you.
I'm going to play it through on the piano. I'm just playing it with one finger so that we can all follow along to that melody. The choir has practiced, so we will sing it all together through twice. The words are on the screen. The words are on two separate screens. I didn't think of that because we were going to break it into a round.
We can do it.
We can do it. Okay, so we're going to sing it through. So I'm going to play it through twice, and then we'll sing it through twice. Look to the choir. They know what's going on. And then, we're going to break into halves. So this half of the church is going to then start on my third round with Poor Rosie, Poor Gal, and sing that verse. And this half of the church is just going to wait, and we'll do a round. So then somehow we'll do this, right, Doug? We're just going to make a joyful noise.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, children. Thank you, everyone. Pat yourselves on the back. There's nothing like a little singing first thing in the morning. And this is what my life is like. We do this every day. We get in and muddle about till we get a good sound happening. So welcome to theater. And I'm going to hand it over to Uchu to tell you more about the piece. Oh, sorry. I jumped.
Well, I was going to say kids can go downstairs, so please join Katie and Bailey downstairs. And just wanted to briefly introduce our choir for music ministry.
Soon and very soon. Now I can get up. Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for being so warm and so welcoming. As Emmy so graciously introduced earlier, my name is Uju, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. As Carrie alluded, it is a process that I am learning as I go. What you're going to be hearing when we do our scene snippets will be a work in progress. So when, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when you come to see the play, when it's mounted, you may recognize some aspects of it, and then there'll be other aspects where you'll be like, wait a second, this is a little different from what I thought was gonna happen. We're not gonna reveal too much because we have to leave enough anticipation so that you're so excited that you're going to sign up for updates from Theater on the Ridge to find out when the next time this is being presented. Plug, plug, plug. But yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit off the cuff. I have some notes. Hopefully I won't be too long-winded, and hopefully I will keep you interested. I think that's always a concern of mine when I'm talking. So right now, yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about the music. So we all bravely engaged in the round of Poor Rosie. I say bravely because when you are seeing something for the first time, when you're encountering something for the first time, there is always a little bit of nervousness. There's always a little bit of trepidation. You're never quite sure you're going to get it right. So in that, you're kind of sharing how I felt when I embarked upon this journey of uncovering and unpacking the story of Samuel Stout. I am a Torontonian, born and raised. I am not from Scugog. So there was a learning curve that I kind of dove into. I was very nervous, I was very anxious, I was a little worried. And the more that I learned about Samuel Stout, the more that I was not able to learn about Samuel Stout, and hopefully I'll tell you more about what I mean by that, if I remember, the more nervous I became, because I wanted to do the story justice. I wanted to do the person justice. And as I speak, to our knowledge, he has no living descendants. Samuel Stout married in 1872 to an Englishwoman named Elizabeth. They had 5 children who didn't have any children. The last of his children, I believe, died in the 1960s. So I'm telling the story of somebody who may or may not have family. Right now, not really anybody who can point and be like, that's a lie, or that didn't happen. So there's a lot of imagination, but to the point, again, with the introduction that happened earlier, I have to acknowledge the generous help and assistance of Dr. Cheryl Thompson, who works at a Toronto Metropolitan University and is a member of the Ontario Black History Society. I also have to acknowledge Mr. Paul Arculus, who is a local Port Perry historian who was instrumental in helping me understand the landscape of Scugog at the time of Samuel Stout's life. So now I'm gonna talk about why music. Okay, so let me toss out some genres here: rhythm and blues, gospel, hip hop, jazz, rock and roll, compa, kizomba, Afro-funk, Afrobeat, disco. Need I say more? These are all music genres which originated with the Black and African diaspora. Music is in our blood, it's part of who we are. And Samuel Stout was a prolific musician. The little that we know about him, we know that he played several instruments. In town, he was referred to as the professor because he was very wise, he was very intelligent. He was the choir master. Hey, Teresa. He was the choir master at the local Presbyterian church, and he set up the town's first band, of which he was the leader of that said band. And we have one photo, I think, from the early 1900s, when he would have been almost 100 years old, walking down the main street leading said band. So obviously, music was a huge part of Samuel Stout's life. And I felt that it would do him a severe and gross injustice if it was not incorporated in some way, in some shape or fashion in the play. 2 other genres of music that I didn't mention when I was listing off the top of my head are spirituals, some of which we see in modern day gospel, and interestingly enough, the Barbershop Quartet. Now, the play, as you'll soon realize, because Carrie's going to when we do our snippet, is set in a barbershop. Samuel Stout worked in the local barbershop well into his 90s, from when he arrived in Reach Township in the 1860s. He passed away in 1911. So he worked in the local barbershop for decades. There is a long and storied history. I am not a historian. I am a storyteller, so I'm not great with dates. I don't always remember names, but I do remember stories. But there is a long and storied history of Black men, particularly African American men specifically, and barbershop. That's a long history that I think we see elements of today. Barbers were one of the few careers that Black men could have, especially after the end of slavery. Even before the end of slavery, it is one of the few careers that Black men could embark upon in white spaces, that they were permitted. Black men were permitted to cut white men's hair because it was seen as a lowly profession at the time. But through that profession, Black men were able to gain financial independence and some degree of financial freedom, particularly in the South, where things like Black banks were set up through the enterprise of Black barbershops, sorry, not barbership. But what happened as time went on is what happens a lot of times I find with Black history is once barbering was seen as a more noble profession, Black barbers and barbershops were kind of pushed out of those white spaces, and Black barbershops became more shops for Black men. Now, there still was segregation with this. If there was a barbershop owned and run by a Black man that was serving white men, Black men were not entering into those spaces. So there was still that segregation. So you found that a lot of Black barbershops owned by Black men were only serving white clientele because it was more lucrative for them to do so. So that's just a bit of an interesting piece. So he came to Scugog, he came to Reach Township as a barber. So the play is set in a barbershop. And he came as a musician. So music has been a huge part of this. So back to the Barbershop Quartet. Sorry, I'm all over the place here. I found out through my research, like I said, I'm not a historian, I'm a storyteller, so the research happens and then it gets put in somewhere. There's an academic, Lynn Barber, who, through their study, found the origins of the Barbershop Quartet in the Negro spiritual. Now, this was a surprise for me, because when you think of a barbershop quartet, you don't necessarily associate it with the spiritual. But they found that through the way the music is set up, they kind of went way back in history to the mid-19th century, and they made what I thought was a really important link. And so without giving too much away, because Carrie, I don't know if I'm getting to that point where I'm giving things away, hopefully not. I will say that that is kind of a way I thought of integrating all of these different aspects of music, the passion, the way that music is an essential part of Black culture all over the world, while also honoring who I believed that Samuel Stout was, based on what we know, and also based on what we don't know. So I'll tell a little bit about Poor Rosie specifically. So Poor Rosie, actually the spirituals that are used in the play came from a book called Slave Songs of the United States. Slave Songs of the United States was written, or compiled, let me not say written, because these songs existed and this individual chose to compile them. It was compiled by a Quaker. And what do we know about Quakers? They were abolitionists. So I find it very interesting. I mean, when I was kind of doing the research, it's funny how all the kind of pieces came together. That this individual, this abolitionist, decided that they were going to compile these songs because they felt that it was important for archiving, for us to have a record of the vast types of music that originated with enslaved people in the United States. And this book it's open source. It's not a secret. You can look it up, Slave Songs of the United States. You can download it if you like. I'm not hiding it. But it's interesting because the individual actually they separated them by region and what part of the United States the songs were heard, or what part of the United States they believed the songs originated. and kind of added some anecdotes here and there where they could. So I thought that was really interesting as well. So what you're hearing music that is hundreds of years old, which I thought was really cool. And Teresa, bless you for transcribing and teaching in some way some really old music that this individual tried as best as they could to put to music, because they're putting to music what they're hearing, you know, and the lyrics vary and the rhythms vary depending on, some people might have heard this song before and think, that's not quite the way I heard it. And that's very common with spirituals, because it depends on where the spiritual originated, it depends on where they heard it from, how they heard it. And I think that's another really beautiful thing just about music as a whole, how diverse it can be within kind of that one subset. I think this is a good way to segue into some scene reading. So now that I've chatted a little bit about Poor Rosie and where it came from, as Carrie mentioned very briefly, Poor Rosie is how the play opens. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but every spiritual was very intentionally chosen as a storytelling device in of itself when it comes to telling the story of Samuel Stout. So I think that I'm not giving too much away by saying that. Carrie says no, so I know I'm good.
I don't think so.
I do, yeah. So we're gonna do we're gonna do some scene readings, and then I'll chat a little bit, because we thought we'd switch it up so you're not just listening to me yammer on.
Perfect. And I just, if I can at this point, one thing that we feel Uju's done masterfully in this play is she's used the music and that those origin points and those subtle nuances about where the music came from, who's singing the music. It's all there. We can't do the whole opening scene. The whole opening scene actually got done at Stratford this past fall, which was really exciting. They have a playwrights program where they literally, you submit your play and they draw 5 plays at random, and then you're given an open public presentation of the opening scene of that play, and it's read by Stratford artists. And then there's a little Q&A, and it's actually somewhat, not juried, but they get feedback from top-level artistic directors from some significant companies. And we had the pleasure of hearing Uju's words read by
Amaka Ome.
Yeah, Amaka Ome, who played Hamlet last year. Oh my goodness, like, I thought her words came to life beforehand, but they were fully alive. So one of the things she's done with the music is there's 3 songs in the opening scene, and each song helps define the status and the role of everyone in the community. She's taken Poor Rosie, then she's introduced a song that would have been an expected song, a performative song.
Yes.
To show what, because when I was looking for the music, I found that I couldn't find a black version of the music. It had all been, one of the songs was actually written by a white person. So that's the song we all think, and most of these songs were sung in grade school. Like, they were taught in the American grade schools, and there's songs that white people have written about what they think, and they came out of minstrel shows and things like that. So Uju's choice of music has also been really strategic to help further the play along. So we will do imagine that Poor Rosie has just been sung. Samuel is singing it all by himself in the barbershop, and the owner of the barbershop, Tom Barber, will come in. Uju will read Samuel, I will read Tom, and this is a lovely introduction to the world that Samuel has found himself in when he's arrived in Port Perry. As Samuel is singing, Tom Barber enters and watches quietly near the door. Sam breaks off his song when he realizes that Tom is there.
Morning, Mr. Barber.
Morning, Sam.
You early, sir, or am I losing time?
No, I'm early. Figured I'd start the week right. Get in earlier than usual. Had a good weekend, Sam?
Yes, sir. Spent it preparing for Sunday service, like usual.
Of course you did. And how many more parishioners this week?
Not sure, sir. Focused on the organ and all. Heard at least 3 new ones come in this week, though.
You're about to have the town up in arms, Sam, luring parishioners away from the other churches with your music.
Except you, sir.
Oh, the day I step into a Presbyterian church is the day Mrs. Barber leaves me. And you know how I feel about her Sunday roast.
How was your Sunday, sir, and your weekend?
Fine as always. Had some friends over for supper. I don't know what Mrs. Barber did with the roast this Sunday, but it was so tender. You didn't need a knife to cut it.
Sounds very fine, sir.
My mouth is watering just thinking about it. I have some today for lunch, sandwiched between 2 slices of her fresh baked bread. Even if she wasn't the most wonderful woman in the world, I think I'd stay married for the food. I might be inclined to share at lunchtime if you're interested.
From the sounds of it, I'd be very interested, Mr. Barber.
Good. You know, I was sure I'd beat you to the shop this morning. I come in, you're already sweeping and setting up for the day.
I like coming in early, being in the shop alone. Not that I mind you being here and all, Mr. Barber, just that I love how the shop smells in the morning. Smell like a new day. Fresh, clean, just like a fresh washed and pressed shirt. The shop smells like possibilities.
Does it now?
Yes, sir. This time of the morning, it's no matter how the rest of the day go. Not worrying about that. Not with the sun warming my face and the shop smell tickling my nose.
What were you singing just now? It's not a song I've heard before.
You sure, sir? I'm singing all the time.
You are, but this one was different.
Now, what was I singing? You know these songs, they just be in and out of my head. I just sing what's on my spirit. Maybe you heard me singing the hymn from yesterday's service. Oh, Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the words thy hands have made.
No, I don't think that was it. I know the song you're singing now. The other song was more end scene.
End scene.
So, do you want to continue in the barber shop? Should we keep going?
We're going to keep going in the barber shop. We'll read you another snippet.
Yeah. So the world, we open with a very accommodating place, a very welcoming environment. We're going to pick up later on in the same opening scene. I will be reading multiple roles here. I'll do my best to make some variations of voices. But a gentleman named George, no, he's not a gentleman. George, an individual named George. He enters for a shave and a cut. He and Sam have past history, which we may not allude to today.
Yes.
Silence. Sam begins to work on George. Tom is tidying up his chair, occasionally looking at Sam surreptitiously. Make sure you shave me nice and close, boy. I see how you shave others.
Yes, sir.
I want to look sharp. I'm calling on a lady, and ladies like men who look sharp. So you are sweet on someone. Yes, I am. I just didn't want to tell that gossipy bastard. And don't you go off telling him either. I'm courting Miss Harmon. Well, congratulations, George. Burnham's still letting you squat on the back of his property? George.
Mr. Burnham is kind enough to allow me to stay. Yes, sir.
It's not kindness. I'm happy. Kindness don't feed the kids. You paying them?
Yes, sir.
How much you pay him to stay there? Why is that your business? That's none of your business. Don't answer him. Just making conversation since your boy's so quiet. Heard he's out there telling stories, singing songs. I come in here, I get no songs, no stories. Thought it was part of the service. Well, you know full well it isn't. Not what everybody in town says. You sing, boy?
Some, sir.
You tell stories?
I tell truths.
Well, go
sir.
on then.
Sir?
Entertain me. Sing me a song. I don't pay him to perform, George. That's not what he's here for. Never mind that. They love to sing and dance. Go on then.
Gone are the days when my heart was young and gay. Gone are my friends from the cotton fields away. Gone from the earth to a better land I know. I hear their gentle voices calling old Black Joe. I'm coming, for my head is bending low. I hear those gentle voices calling old Black Joe.
Well, all right, Sam. Well, all right. See, Tom, I told you, they love to sing and dance.
All done, sir.
End scene. Old Black Joe is the song I was referring to. It was not written by a black person, and it was sung as a regular school thing in primary schools, quite regularly.
Has anybody here heard the song before, Old Black Joe? Show of hands. How many here knew, of those who've heard the song before, how many people knew it was a minstrel song? Wait, sorry, but let me back up. Is anybody here familiar with minstrelsy? Show of hands? Okay. So again, as Carrie mentioned, minstrelsy is actually a political tactic used by the United States at the time of the abolition of slavery. It was around that time when the North and the South were having their conflict, and one of the purposes of minstrelsy was to showcase enslaved people as being happy to be enslaved. So songs like Dixie, Old Black Joe were created and performed by black performers, although sometimes there were white performers in what we called blackface, to showcase the happy slaves singing in the fields, and then that was used politically as a means of saying, they don't really want to be free, so why are we trying to do this? So that's my 30-second non-historian primer on minstrelsy.
Thank you. How are we doing for time? We're good?
We're good for time? Okay.
So we'd like to just show another piece of life as Uju has envisioned it for Samuel, in that there were other members of the black community in the area, perhaps not settling, other barbers working in the area. And Uju, this is a fictional character as far as we know. George Sheehy is a real character, and Tom Barber's name has been changed, but he was an actual person. And we're going to introduce the character of Isaac. I told you we had an Isaac here today. And he's a friend.
He is a friend.
Night at the barber shop. A small card table with 2 chairs is out with a checkerboard on the top of the table in pieces. Sam is sitting at the card table, sharpening his tools when Isaac comes in. Well, hey there, Mr. Stout.
Boy, if you don't keep your voice down.
Oh, I see you set us up already. Not sure I need a cut this time around, though. What do you think?
You got the kind of face only the Lord and your mother can love. You always need a cut. Come on and sit before I change my mind. We can play checkers while I make you presentable.
Well, if you're making me bring money out of my pocket, we might as well wager. If I win, my cut is free.
You never win.
Miracles happen every day. Your play.
You keep playing like that, you definitely not seeing a miracle tonight.
Come on now, we're just getting started. How can you tell that with just one move?
Because you leap before you look instead of looking before you leap. How you move in life is how you move in checkers.
You're just saying that because you know me.
Okay, why'd you make that move then?
Well, the whole board's open. What's it matter?
Exactly my point. Every move matters, everyone. It might don't make sense to me or to anyone else looking at it, but it needs to make sense to you. The board seems open now, but 3 moves later, you stuck and you losing pieces. Now what? You can't remember how you moved before, and you don't know what to do moving forward. You gotta move with purpose.
I do move with purpose. I'm purposely a rolling stone. Ain't collecting no moss, just keeping it moving. I don't need a home because I'm always home. Don't need no land, no house. Take a few jobs here and there, get some cash in my pocket, pay for a haircut now and again, keep it moving.
I don't know how you can do it.
I'm not like you, Sam, that's how. I don't know how you can stay here. You really wanting to set roots here?
Gotta settle sometime. You young, you'll learn.
I know I gotta settle someday, but why here, this place? It's just another white town like all the others. A main street with a general store, somewhere to lay your head, somewhere to eat, a place to worship. Sometimes you can make a friend or two.
You answer the question first then. Why are you here?
Because I made a friend or two. But eventually I'll move on. That's my ministry. I've come from far off places, Came up from the south, you know.
Tennessee, right?
Yep, preaching the good news as I go. Sometimes people had use for a preacher, and I'll stay a little while longer. Other times it wasn't safe or I wasn't really welcome, so I kept moving and pushing, all the way up from Tennessee, and here I am in Port Perry. I don't ever see myself heading back south, but
You don't see yourself with roots here.
of course not. I got to be with my people, Sam, in community with them. Don't you feel that? You're happy being the only one of our kind here?
I am content, yes.
How? Working for a white man, living on a white man's property in a white man's house? How are you content?
You gotta settle.
Sometimes, I know you said, but this feels safe to you? They'll turn on you in a minute. No amount of clean pressed shirts and yes sirs are gonna change that. There's no safety in that, no security in that. You're just sitting here day after day doing everything in your power so they can find you useful. What happens when you're not useful anymore, huh? When your fingers can't bend to grab the razor, when your eyes can't see where the scissors should be and you draw blood. What do you think they'll do with you then?
Do with me?
Yes, do with you. You are property, chattel. You do their bidding just as our people have been doing for hundreds of years, and you think because you've chosen it that you're free. You sing when they want you to sing, smile when they want you to smile, laugh when they expect it. You're clean and neat, smelling fresh and looking good because they like it that you look good. You cut their hair, shave their beards, listen to their stories. Then you cut your own hair, shave your own beard, and your own stories are heard in a barber shop at night, sitting at a card table with two chairs that only part of my behind can sit on because you and I can't sit on their chairs, can't use their combs, and can't use their razors.
Are you riling me up to distract me from how poorly you're playing, or is something else at work here?
I'm trying to wake you up, Sam. You cannot find peace lying in bed with snakes, even if it's a comfortable bed.
Isaac, I've traveled. You know about all the places I've seen. And like you, I've always wanted to move on until I got here. And sometimes things happen to tempt you into moving on, but my spirit tells me this is the place for me, my final resting place whenever God calls me home. Maybe I can even start a family.
A family? We the only ones here.
Aren't you a preacher? I thought with God all things are possible.
Point taken.
It don't have to be home for you, Isaac, but it can be for me. I'm tired of moving on, of trying to find a place to call home. Maybe I'm being stubborn, and I know the way the world is for us.
It's solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, according to Thomas Hobbes, a white man. What is the world for us, if for them it's solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short? Whatever the world is, I do know that I don't take my freedom for granted, and I certainly do not leave it to anyone to dictate to me the terms of my freedom. Say I decide to sit and get my hair cut from here overnight, and he walks to the other chair.
Isaac, what are you doing?
These are my terms. My freedom means I sit in a white man's chair, and I have my friend groom me, if he chooses to.
You can't sit there, Isaac. I told Mr. Barber.
What do you choose,
Come
Samuel?
down from there, Isaac. You are going to get me in trouble.
Mr. Stout, I am talking to you about freedom, and you're worrying about...
I said come down from there.
End scene. So that just gets you into the story, but I think it gives you a sense of the world that Samuel is in, and it gives you a world that Samuel carries within himself. So I'm going to leave the stage. I'm going to hand it back to Uju. She can finish off, and then she'll invite some questions from anybody who wants to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. So I hope from just listening to those snippets, what I hope has been conveyed are kind of some of the themes that are being explored in the play. One of the big, I guess it's a set of themes, not one theme, but it's kind of the questions that I wrestled with, and I still wrestle with, because I said it's a process, this play, are kind of themes of identity, home, community, and belonging. And I think that these are pretty universal themes. I don't think this is restricted to Samuel. It's not restricted to myself. But I think these are themes that everybody can think of. It's like, who am I? Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Where do I call home? Who are my friends? Who are my people? Where is my community? And these themes are kind of interwoven throughout the play. And one of the big reasons for me was because, as I was contemplating the piece, the big question I had, and I'm not the only one who had this question. When I talked to people, other people had the question too, is like, why did he stay? And this is not to disparage Scugog at all, because I think Scugog is lovely, as are the people. However, I think I'd mentioned, so Samuel Stout, he was born a free man in New Jersey, and he came up from New Jersey. At the time that he came up, New Jersey, the state of New Jersey had abolished slavery, but if you were born, Samuel Stout was born 1811, if you were born before, I believe it was 1804 or 1807, you would be in indentured servitude until adulthood because you were born before slavery was abolished. So he was born after slavery was abolished, so he was born free. I don't know if his parents were free or not. I guess it's safe to assume that they weren't. But this was, of course, a time when people would go to the north and kidnap men, people, black people, and enslave them in the south. So even though he was free, he certainly wasn't safe. So this is an adequate justification, more than adequate justification for Samuel Stout to decide to leave. Now, if we try to track kind of his pathway, which we don't know, he had no diary, he had no journal, so we don't actually know how he ended up in Scugog, but hypothetically, along the way, he would have stopped somewhere like Kingston. He could have kept going to Toronto. He could have continued further down to Chatham, Leamington, Amherstburg. He could have decided to go out east to Africville. There were communities in Owen Sound. There were communities in Kitchener-Waterloo. I'm speaking specifically about African-Canadian communities of formerly enslaved people who decided to settle and make Canada their home. There were a lot of settlements along the way. And even if they weren't on the way, he could have just kept going. He arrived in Canada, they estimate around 1855. So the path to Scugog was a few years. So maybe he did stop. Maybe he did settle somewhere, an African community, and decided that it wasn't for him. But again, we have no journal, we have no diary, so I don't really know why Scugog ended up being the place he stayed, because it's after he settled in Scugog that he got married. He met his wife and got married. So I had to try and find the answer for myself in some way. It had to make sense to me. So I really just thought about, like, what does it mean to be home? What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to have community? And through, I'm going to divert slightly, but through kind of that contemplation, I thought about my own family. So I was born, like I said, I was born and raised in Canada, in Toronto specifically. I'm of Nigerian heritage. And my uncle, his name is Fidelis Azamanari. He is 93 years old and very sprightly. He came to Canada in 1964. And he decided, of all places, to go to Calgary. God bless him. But he went to Calgary. This is not to disparage Calgary. Sorry for any Calgarians. It's just cold. So it's just cold. I'm like, why there? But he went to Calgary to pursue his PhD in physics. Now, at the time, there were these Commonwealth schemes. So Nigeria was a member of the Commonwealth, as was Canada, India, etc. So you had a lot of students from places like Nigeria, Ghana, and India going to different parts of Europe and Canada for study. So this is how my uncle came to Canada. He came under a Commonwealth scheme. He was the only black man in his program. Surprise, surprise, it's 1964 in Calgary. And he faced an inordinate amount of opposition from other students, from faculty. He'd come out of class and have "nigger go home" scrawled on his locker. He had professors tell him that under them, there is no way they will ever pass him in their class because he should not be there. It is wrong that he's there. He had professors tell him he is doing very well, but they can't in good conscience give him a better grade than the white students. It just doesn't seem right. He had people actively discourage him. He had people who didn't want to hire him. He had people who didn't want him to work with them on their research. And on the other side of it, he had people who encouraged him. He had professors tell him, you have a lot of talent, you're very intelligent, you're a strong student. It's a professor who ultimately helped him get his job with the government of Canada, working on weather systems. That was what he did. So I guess as I contemplated his story, as I contemplated his life, I contemplated opposition, and I also contemplated allyship. Because if you're faced with insurmountable opposition and just opposition, eventually you'll get up and you'll leave. But I know that's not what happened for Samuel, because like I said, he led the town's first band. He was the choir master at the local Presbyterian church. He was affectionately referred to as the professor. He worked in the barbershop for decades until he was well into his 90s. So obviously he had friends. Obviously he was able to make it home. Obviously, to an extent, he ended up belonging. So I see kind of Samuel's story in my uncle's story. And I know for all of us who are settlers here, because just looking in the room, and sorry, I don't mean to make judgments based on appearance, we're settlers. We had somebody in our family at some point come and settle here, and there may be people for whom that's not the case, and that's fine. But whether it was 150 years ago, 400 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, somebody decided to make this land their home. So I think to that extent, all of us can see this story of belonging, of settling, of trying to make somewhere home, trying to make somewhere belong in Samuel Stout's story. And I think the other piece that I thought was interesting, because of course I thought, a black man by himself, and that's not saying he was by himself for a very long time, being the only black man there, but for a black man, an African-American man, how do you even begin to find community? How do you even begin to start that process of belonging? And I think he's incredibly brave, as is anyone who decides to migrate and leave everything they know to go somewhere else. I think it's always an incredibly brave action. But, getting there? Okay, I'm gonna be quick. But he didn't need to find community the way some of us do, because I believe he actually made it. And by his work, the lifeblood of Port Perry was fed by his labor, by his hands that played the instruments, by his hands that, held the scissors. I think by his labor he belonged. And I guess what I struggle with, and I don't mean to end this on a bad note, but it's not a bad note, I think it's just an interesting note. I guess what I struggle with sometimes when thinking about his life is the fact that he had to labor. I know that it wasn't an easy path, but I think that his story is an important part of the Scugog story, and I'm happy that Theatre on the Ridge decided to initiate this process, because I think by unpacking his story, we're able to unpack the story of Scugog as a whole. I think that, to end, it's rather unfortunate that even though he had all these accomplishments and he was the person he was by our estimation and by what's written about him, he's buried in an unmarked portion of the cemetery, in a copse of trees where you can kind of point to and say he's somewhere in this vicinity. So despite his accomplishments, despite what he contributed to the town, he's not really commemorated, I think, in the way that he should as a trailblazer and as a pioneer. So we're hoping through this project, by raising awareness, we'll be able to, raise the profile of Samuel Stout, as well as maybe put a plaque up, something to commemorate who this man was and what he meant to the town of Scugog. So with that, I'll close because I'm getting long-winded, but thank you.
Not long-winded, just passionate. And that does take us full circle. Was when we were doing the research in 2017 for the cemetery walks, that it was pointed out that there is a couple headstones for Stout, but they are for his children, and no one knows exactly where Samuel has been buried. So after being pronounced the oldest living man in Port Perry at the time of his death and all those accomplishments, he was still relegated to an unidentified place of burial for his permanent rest. And that's something, who knows? We'll just let that simmer out there. We'll work on the play first. I just want to say the next steps, because I'm sure you're dying to know, is we're going to keep developing the play. We are actively discussing a full production, hopefully in 2025. But the world moves strangely these days in the post-COVID world. We have a prospective creative team, a very well-known artist, because we need to hand this over to a full creative team of people of color to manage this play. We have wonderful, talented, supportive beings that got us here, but to take it to its final realization, we need to move bigger. And that involves, so our main steps over the next year or so, and this isn't a flog, but it's just a reality. I think people don't, we need to secure the funds to mount that production, and it will take us a good year or so to generate the funds that we need to, but we're gonna keep the community apprised of what we're doing, and keep engaging in workshops like, workshops and events like this. And I just wanna thank all the artists, all the funders, people such as yourself who have helped us bring Samuel back to the community. Thank you. Nope, they're not there. They're not there fast enough. I'm coming back. Just to let you know, we're going to continue some Black History Month activities. We are doing a pop-up First Read Club, which is our book club, only about theater stuff. So check out our website or watch our Facebook page. We're going to do Lisa Codrington, an amazing Toronto Black playwright, one of her plays later on in the month. And we're even going to launch a First Read Club YP, Young People's Edition, with this play, and that will be held on the PA Day on the 16th. So we're just working out the final details, so stay tuned and keep involved.
All right, so now we'll bring forward our offering. And we'll invite the congregation to sing together. We have Your Work, O God, Needs Many Hands. Thank you. All right, please be seated. All right, so let us pray. Your gifts to us are diverse and many. In gratitude for all you have given to us, we offer these gifts of money. Yet not only our monies, we also offer to you our time and our abilities. Use these gifts to make your love known throughout the world. We dedicate ourselves and all that we are to your work. This we pray in your name. Amen. And that's a prayer from Reverend Paul Douglas Walfall. All right, now, we're running short on time, so we didn't get a chance to do Q&A, but I will invite you downstairs to come ask questions and join us for coffee. We're not quite there yet, but that's when we will do it. I would like to thank both Uju and Carrie for giving us their time, for participating in this service, for the screen reading. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I should also thank Jesse Gillis, a member of our affirming committee, who really helped us connect with both Carrie and Uju. That has been great. All right, now, as we go out into the world this week, please do join us in our closing choral, Let There Be Peace on Earth. Thanks, everyone. Please join us downstairs for coffee.